Welcome to the Empress Lioness, a sacred space where the spirit roars and the soul remembers everything. In each episode, we sit with visionaries, founders, creators, and healers. I'm your host, Karen Mitchell. Welcome back, beautiful souls, to another episode of the Empress Lioness podcast, the sanctuary where women rise into their power, reclaim their voice, and remember that sometimes the life trying to emerge in you will no longer fit inside rooms built on approval. Today's conversation is for the woman who knows what it feels like to be edited, to be filtered, to be told to make it smaller or safer, be more acceptable or polished. And somewhere in that process, many women begin to lose contact with their original voice, their boldness, their creative instincts, their inner authority. Because when the world keeps rewarding what is safe, it can take real courage to trust what is true. But there comes a moment when a woman gets tired of being watered down, tired of building by someone else's standards, tired of measuring success by metrics that do not honor her spirit. And when that moment comes, she starts building differently, not from permission, from conviction, not from performance, but from self-trust. And today, I am joined by Gianni Spradley, founder and CEO of 15 East Media Group. Gianni is a marketing and public relations leader whose firm describes her as a seasoned professional with more than 2 decades of industry experience. But what stood out to me most was the deeper story behind her company's why. On the brand's public site, Gianni shares that years in corporate America taught her what she did not want to build. A world where creativity was filtered, bold thinking watered down, and success measured by someone else's metrics. That realization became part of the foundation for 15 East Media Group and the kind of work she now leads. What makes this conversation powerful is that it's not only about media or strategy. It is about what happens when a woman stops letting systems edit her voice. And so now for the real questions. But let's welcome Gianni to the show. Welcome.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
So, Gianni, before I
Yes.
start with all of the questions that we all want to know about, take us back to where you were before life taught you how to be strong.
I would like to say questioning and doubting myself. I always tell people when I talk to folks, people always see, the glamorous side of being an entrepreneur because you have complete autonomy of your schedule. You're doing all the things, it's fancy and this and that, but you really have to ascertain what is real and what is not, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes it could be a battle, right? And sometimes you doubt yourself, like, I don't know. It could be a lot of, I don't know how I feel, but I really had to rely on trusting my instinct. And as they say, trusting your gut, like really
Yeah.
honing in on that. It went from doubt, like, can I really do this? Am I really qualified? I don't know. To
Yeah.
no, what is your gut saying? If they could do it, you could do it. And especially if you have the passion and the fervor to do, and making sure that your why is not rooted in ego, which it
Yeah.
wasn't. And then kind of just go from there.
So was that the questions you were asking yourself when you decided to step out and do your own thing, or just trying to find who you was as an individual or as a woman?
I think it was a combination of both, to be totally transparent with you. For me, I feel like I was an anomaly, right? Because I actually have corporate America experience. So I came from
Right.
corporate.
Okay.
So I it ranged from financial to nonprofit, excuse me, to wines and spirits to luxury. Like I literally have the bulk of my experience from corporate.
Okay.
So I'll never forget, I always used to say, I want to be my own boss. I want to have my own agency. So it's be careful what you wish for, right? Because I ended up getting laid off from Goldman Sachs in 2011. And it was like, I feel like, for people who are, believers, it was like God saying, like, well, you said this is what you want to do. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just just understanding and comprehending like, okay, it's about to get real and just going through the motions and really going through the journey. And hopefully I'm answering your question,
You are.
especially with the journey portion, right? Because sometimes people are like, okay, I can't wait till I get to, number 10. You know what I mean? But you're at number 1 or number 2. They wanna just fast track it. No, you can't fast track it because you're not going to be able to learn those lessons along the way. I've learned so many lessons throughout my journey as an entrepreneur, not only as a businesswoman, just as a woman, period. And I'm still learning. I'm not off the learning train. I'll tell you that right now. But just how I had to really just dig deep and really just it's just a lot, it's a lot of moving parts, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I encourage women who are just at, I don't want to say a breaking point, but just at a point where they're just at a crossroads.
Yeah.
Really, I encourage them to really sit down and be silent and be present and really dig deep on the why. And if you have all of this, the why is really resonating with you, you need to keep on. But again, if it's rooted in ego or it's rooted in, well, I'm just trying to make, a couple that I want,
Yeah.
it needs to have a real meaning. And if you have a real meaning for what you're doing, stay steadfast. And this is from somebody who has gone through the trenches, because I think sometimes when other up and coming entrepreneurs see budding or experienced entrepreneurs, they feel like they haven't gone through the trenches or they don't have,
That's true.
a battle story.
Yeah.
Everyone has a battle story, whether you know what I mean, whether it's level 1 or level 10, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But just I encourage those women who are out there, continue the course. God placed this dream on your heart for a reason. You
Yeah.
have to charter the course.
But you know what though? I find that some women will have that feeling, that nudge. I know for me, when before I started my business, I did too, when I was afraid because like you, I was in corporate America.
Right.
And I was making good money. I had a great job. I had vacation time. It was like a
Mhm.
perfect job.
Yeah.
And when I got that nudge, it was like, oh no, but I'm so comfortable here. I don't need to do anything else. I don't even know how to start. I don't know what to do. And I didn't have anyone to help me to say or encourage me and say, hey, maybe you could do it part time while you're doing this. But we all know, or I should say, because where you're at, you know, that if you don't listen or adhere to that voice that's telling you to take your time and get out, it will force you out by being laid off, fired, anything. And that's what happened to me. I got laid off as well. And I
Wow.
had no other choice. I'm telling you, before I got laid off, I kept telling myself, "Oh, I really hated my job. I was an IT project manager. I hated it. I just did my own thing. They couldn't even keep me in a box. I went to socialize on the job.
Right.
And it wasn't until I started saying, you know what, I should leave. I should find me another job. What do I really want to do, Karen? I wanted to do kitchen design because I was a kitchen designer. So I went to Home
Okay.
Depot
Mhm.
to apply for a job and they didn't
Mhm.
have one. So I was just a store associate. Let me tell you, that thing beat me up so bad. I felt like the universe was saying, we didn't tell you to come here. We told you
Right,
to
that's
start
not
a
what we
business.
said. Alright.
I say that to say this: women that have that same or go through that same experience that are afraid to step out of the box and really venture out and having their own business, what advice would you give them to maybe take those baby steps toward entrepreneurship?
Yeah, great question. So, and please forgive me if I'm paraphrasing this. They say on the opposite side of fear is success. You have
Yeah,
to face your fear. You can't, you could tiptoe around it and, think you're going to bob and weave. No, you have to face it head on, because
yeah,
on the other side is going to be joy and almost like a sigh of relief. Like, wow, if I was able to tackle that, I could tackle the next, maybe I could tackle the next mountain, because it's going to be valleys and streams. So for me, I just encourage those to take a breath, and not saying that they have to take it all on one at once. Absolutely not. But just know that each entrepreneur that you may look up to or may know that may have it going on, they've gone through some sort of strife and struggle. It has not
yeah,
been perfect for them. Sometimes when I speak to, other entrepreneurs that, are making more money than I do, and I hear about their problems, I'm like, woof, let me touch the hem of your garment. You know what I mean? Because everybody is going through something. But at the end of the day, it's choose your hard, right? Choose your hard.
yeah. And that's really good advice for these women because you're right. They do feel as if they just made this easy, but it's one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life was attend to my business and
Yeah.
keep it going and flowing, and you're everything to everyone. And
Yes.
I was no longer working 8-hour days. I was working 24-hour days sometimes, you know?
Yes. Yes.
So
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't think people really realize that the multiple hats that you wear. I mean, to be honest with you, when I was in the trenches, I didn't have a social life. It was obliterated, right? Not only did I have a social life because it's not that I didn't want to go out, I didn't have the money to go out. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, my friends were going on trips and they were doing this, that, and the third, in
yeah,
their 30s. I couldn't. And at first I felt away, but then, that voice spoke to me and was like, this is your path. This comes along with the territory.
yeah,
You're not going to be down for long. You know what I mean? This is just the process. You have to trust the process.
yeah. You're
So,
building.
yeah, absolutely. Relationships suffered. It wasn't until I'll say about 4 or 5 years ago, I was really able to come out of the dark, if you will, and start to foster those relationships again. But, for those who really knew me and loved me, they didn't hold any sort of grudge because of that. They knew. I mean, there were times where I couldn't, go to my line sister's wedding or go to a baby shower, because I didn't
Yeah,
have the money for a ticket or I didn't have a money for a gift. You know what I mean?
right, right.
But they knew. They didn't take that to offense. They knew, like, she has a bigger mission. And, of course, eventually, I was able to celebrate with them in another capacity. But for
Right.
those who love you, they essentially they know.
They understand.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I would
I mean,
hope.
and that's an important aspect that people don't really consider when they think about starting their own businesses is that
Yes.
you're gonna get out of the social life. Even if you have the funds to do it, you still have to come out because you focus in on it's like a baby, right? You
Yeah.
gave birth to this business, you have to nurture it, you have to make sure it survives and it grows up and it becomes successful. And in order to do that, your entire focus is on that or it's on that business.
Yeah.
But I also know that there are a lot of women that are not as fortunate to even have the money to start a business. And I know you and I were talking before, and you were telling me, or even know which business they want to get into. And
Yeah.
we were talking about coaches and stuff. And you did mention something very important that I wanted my listeners to know. So I'm going to allow you to share that about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So as I was sharing with Karen, I actually had gotten my first business coach, I'll say about 2 or 3 years ago. And quite frankly, he was very expensive, but I knew the potential value that I could obtain from this person. This person has over 40 years of experience in marketing, worked with Fortune 500 companies, C-suite level. you name it. However, when I started to be mentored by him or coached by him, I should say, it was not in alignment with what I thought. Our conversations were more about, my relationship with money and, how do I feel about abundance? Do I feel that I'm worthy of it? More from that psychological lens. And
Yeah.
at that juncture, I knew I was a money magnet. I love money and money loves me. That's not what I need, sir. You know what I mean? I need for somebody to help me build out my pipeline. Like, how do I get
Right.
clients? And not only how do I get clients, how do I retain these clients? Like, what are the,
Right.
show me the way. And it wasn't like that. So unfortunately, I had to really take a step back and really ascertain, is this what I need right now? And I elected to say no. So I'll say about 3 or 4 months ago, it was introduced to me about maybe getting another business coach. And I've always wanted another business coach, but it's like a doctor, right? You have to find the right fit for you, right? So
Right.
I was like, okay, I'll check it out. You know what I mean? But it ended up being a great fit. And I ended up finding this business coach through my financial institution where I bank. They have a program. So I was like, this is even better. So, and I knew someone who actually worked in the inside. So they gave me an opportunity to say, okay, so these are the business coaches that we have. There are some that are real like straight and narrow to the book. And then there are others that, our expertise is in other pockets. So for me, since I'm very outgoing and all of the things, I wanted somebody who was like, a lack of a better words, and I don't mean this in a negative connotation, a nerd. I needed somebody to really, you know what I mean? Okay, Gianni, like really nuts and bolts and by the book. Like I needed someone like that
Yeah.
because, it's the yin and the yang. And I ended up finding him. Shout out to Nate. And Nate really opened my eyes to certain things that I was not necessarily doing wrong, but essentially that I can improve upon.
Yeah.
So, I look forward to speaking to Nate. I speak to Nate twice a month. I even call Nate sometimes when I need a little advice or I need just, some yeah, just essentially
Yeah.
advice or just another thought process. I'm like, am I thinking about this the right way? Am I bugging? You know what I mean? So I'm very appreciative to be in the spot that I am now. And not only do I have a business coach, a great business coach, but I also have what they call a sponsor, right? So I guess they've obliterated the word mentorship and they have someone they call a sponsor. So I have a sponsor, but I don't even like calling her a sponsor. I like calling her, I say my Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? So, she's she's very well connected in the marketing and PR industry. She's very well known. And when I met her, it's so funny because I always said I wanted to have, someone like her in my life. But every time when I would ask someone of her stature to mentor me or to sponsor me, these women would flat out either ghost me, ignore me, or tell me no. And at first I felt a way about it, right? I'm like, well, dang,
Yeah.
that's just not cool. But as I've gotten older, I understood it. These women are probably overworked, overwhelmed, have other responsibilities, and they in their free time, they don't necessarily want to dedicate it to me. I had to come to that realization, right? So once I came to that realization, when I met my mentor slash sponsor, however you want to, I call it my OG, it was like a breath of fresh air, right? Because when I met her, I already knew who she was. So when I met her at an event, she introduced my she introduced herself to me, and I'm thinking to myself, "Lady, I know who you are, like real." So she was like, "Let's exchange contact information," which happens to me very often, and I come from the the elk of when you exchange business information 8 times out of 10, these people aren't going to reach you. It's just for formalities, right? It's just like, oh, give me your number, I'll call you. And it's like, okay, girl. You know what I mean? It's like that.
Yeah.
Literally, I gave her my information. The event was on a Friday. No, the event was on a Thursday. Friday morning, she called me up and I'll never forget this, 9:15 in the morning, and we talked on the phone for an hour. I was like, you remember the Beyonce meme when she won the Grammy for Cowboy Carter, where she's like this? Like, that's how I was when I saw my phone ring early in the morning. I was like, what is happening here? And ever since then, I knew she was, as they call it, like a real one. I knew she was, it's almost like God saved the ace in the hole for me. Like, I went through all of that to get to here. You know what I mean? And within our industry, you have a lot of people who, have a lot of lip service. So,
Yeah.
she didn't know me from a can of paint. She could have, thought I was
Or didn't she?
right, right, a fly by night or whatever, or just, somebody who wasn't, who they didn't, who said who they weren't. But, and this was actually 3 years ago. So we've maintained.
I'm your host, Karen Mitchell.